All right, what's up, YouTube? It is the Hooked on Football podcast. We are back for another episode, Hooked on Football podcast, where we discuss all things football. Today, specifically, we're going to be breaking down the Thursday night football games. We have Nebraska at Minnesota and Utah at Florida. So, getting right into our first game of the night, Nebraska at Minnesota, we have a Big Ten West showdown. The hype is real for Nebraska. I mean, it really seems like each year people are just hoping for Nebraska to be good. I think that's a good thing about being a blue chip team is just every year there's this crazy hype and kind of anticipation for these programs to be good again. It's been, I think, at least 2 decades since Nebraska has really been in that blue chip contending, but still each year they're getting that hype. And as everybody knows, I mean, unless you're living under a rock, Nebraska brings in Matt Rhule. I think that has to do with some of the hype. Matt Rhule, obviously people love to tout how he is a program builder. He turns around programs, turned around a program at Temple, also Baylor. They were in some pretty bad standings too before he got there. But getting right into kind of looking at the team as a whole before we get into more specifics, we have Minnesota, who is they're a very fundamentally sound team. They're generally well coached. They aren't going to scorch you with their athletes, but what they are going to be, they're going to be disciplined. They're going to execute well. We look at their quarterback, bringing in a new one, Ethan Kaliakmanis. I think I'm saying that right. There's not too much on him. I don't think he's really that proven of a quarterback. So we'll get to see tomorrow night. The O-line is returning 2 guys from last year, so it's a pretty unproven line. Kind of curious to see how that turns out. As you know, for the Gophers last year, passing game was essentially non-existent. They had a huge running game. I guess before I get into Nebraska, though, Michael, if you want to chime in on Minnesota's offense, if you have anything else to add on.
Yeah, the consensus for Minnesota seems to be that obviously last year they had Ibrahim, the running back. I don't remember his first name, but
yeah,
total stud. They were super run heavy. They had a terrible passing offense. And this year it's all going to flip. Ibrahim's gone. I think they still have some okay backs, but from what I've gathered, this new quarterback is got a pretty decent arm. Is a pretty decent thrower. So they're going to kind of make the switch to more of a passing game. So I'll be interested. I looked up the stat. They were number 64 in total offense last year in the Power 5. That's out of 69 teams. So pretty bad, but the defense was number 9. So the defense was really stout. So from what I saw, it looks like they lost a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, but they're still expected to be pretty good. So I'm kind of curious to see what Minnesota looks like. I think there's still some question marks there. I mean, anytime you go from run heavy to pass heavy, it's a pretty big transition. So I'm really curious to see what they look like overall tomorrow night.
Right. And I think the Gophers, they come in. As of yesterday, it was a 7-point favorite. Is that what you have on your end?
Yeah, still a 7-point favorite.
7-point favorite. I'll get into that a little bit, whether I agree with that or not. But turning things around here, looking at Nebraska, Nebraska's offense, they're bringing in Jeff Sims from Georgia Tech. From what I've gathered, he's not really a tried and true quarterback. He played about 6 or 7 games for the Yellow Jackets. went 5 touchdowns, threw 3 interceptions. He threw 1,000 yards. So he's not really trying true. I'll be curious to see what he looks like. Apparently, he's kind of like an Anthony Richardson type build. He's about 6'5", 230. So just a huge physical specimen. But I'm not sure quite if I'm buying on to this quarterback hype that he's getting. I think it's kind of like the Anthony Richardson situation where it's a lot of hype, but there's not a lot of product so far. Moving on to the offensive line for Nebraska, I think that this could be one of their weakest positions. So I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out. Also, I know Rhule has talked about how he's wanting some guys to step up on the offensive line. Getting into though, I guess do you have the running back game, Michael?
On Nebraska? No, I don't have anything on.
Okay.
I only had something on the quarterback. I don't have anything on the running back.
Okay. But kind of getting more in depth on Nebraska. There's a lot of people on the Rhule hype train. Can he turn the Huskers around in one season? I've seen some people throw out some numbers that they think Nebraska can get 7 wins pretty comfortably. I'm seeing people say they at least get to a bowl game, but I'm not seeing it. You have a program that, at least for the past decade, that's had a pretty toxic culture. I think Matt Rhule, he's a great leader. However, though, I think it's going to take a couple of years, 1 or 2 years. I think if they do get to a bowl win this season, I think that's going to be or a bowl, not a bowl win, but a bowl game. I think that's going to be a gigantic win for the Cornhuskers if they can even get there. But things like these take more time. Do you think that Matt Rhule is? Would you say he's on the hot seat whatsoever?
On the hot seat, first game at Nebraska.
Well, first season.
Well, and first game tomorrow night too. No, I actually think I don't know. I think it probably depends on how patient Nebraska is willing to be with them. I mean, he's a good coach. He's got a good proven track record in college football. He runs kind of the 3-year plan. If you go back and look at Temple and Baylor, first season's terrible. Second season, he lifts them up to about a 500 record. And then the third season's kind of the breakthrough. So that's true. I don't know. Nebraska's not in the same state that like Temple and Baylor were when he was rebuilding them. Right. Nebraska's not in a good state. Like they won 4 games last year. And I actually don't have it on me how many they won the year before that, but it's obviously been really bad. Scott Frost was on a downward trajectory. Yeah. So I don't know. I think Rhule will be a good coach. I think he can definitely turn them into like a 7 to 9 win type program, but I don't know if Nebraska fans, their whole mess kind of got started because they ran Bo Pelini out of town. He kept going 9-3, 9-4, and they weren't satisfied with that. So I think it's going to take some time. And I actually think Nebraska is going to be relatively patient partly because they have to be. So I think they're going to give him some time to turn things around. And I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see Nebraska tomorrow because I also have heard stuff about Sims. Supposedly he's just a specimen, super athletic. But at the same time, I've also heard that Nebraska is going to run their offense is going to go back to a little more of that like power football. Huddling up, going under center, using 2 tight ends, just things like that. Whereas Frost had them pretty spread out. So I'm kind of curious how that looks. I feel like offensively, Nebraska the last several years, like they have some players, like you watch their games, like they have some athletes. Right. I feel like that's never been in doubt. I know I've also read the O-line's a weak spot. The defense has been terrible. So again, it's going to take some time to rebuild. You bring in a new system, all that type of stuff. Rhule's not going to have his own guys in there for a couple of years. I know they hit the transfer portal and stuff, but
Yeah.
It's gonna take some time. So I don't know. I'm actually kind of curious though to see tomorrow night. Again, I know Minnesota's a 7-point favorite. They're at home. They probably should be. They beat Nebraska by a touchdown last year, but I'm kind of curious to see what Nebraska looks like, kind of playing with that new coach energy. I feel like sometimes, you change up the locker room, you
there's
get some
something
new
to that.
guys in there. Yeah, sometimes you just come out and, you have all that excitement and all that energy and stuff, and you put out a good performance. So
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see what they look like tomorrow night. That's for sure.
Right. And I guess the case with Rhule turning this program around in a year, I think there is merit to that argument because Nebraska. At the end of the day, it is a blue chip program, and you look at their recruiting. They ranked 20th in the past 5 years, so it's not exactly that Scott Frost was leaving the cupboard bare. They do have talent around.
Yeah, he did do a good job recruiting.
Yes, and this kind of shows the coaching because looking at their win conversion, it's 69th, and they're in FBS, and their player development is 66th in Power 5. So what is that? What is that in Power 5? 62nd to the bottom. Not good.
Yeah.
So one of the worst for Power 5s. But Nebraska, though, a player to watch out for them is Anthony Grant. Had just around 1,000 yards last season at running back. I do think that it's just going to be kind of a classic Big Ten game where a lot of defense, offenses, I think, are going to be a little slow to get up on their feet. I would seriously recommend the under in this game. I think it's going to be a pretty slow game as far as offensively. Both teams not really proven in their pass game.
Yeah, I would agree. I would expect it to be relatively slow. I would not take Nebraska to win because I know it's a different era with Matt Rhule in town, but anytime I ever bet on Nebraska the last couple seasons, it always came back to bite me. So I would not bet on Nebraska to win tomorrow. I think they do keep it competitive. I could see them covering 7 potentially, but I do think it's going to be a close game. I think it'll be a good game. Like I said, I think it's like you said, I think it'll be kind of classic Big Ten slugfest, probably not a ton of points, but I think it'll be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I wanted to look at though real quick is kind of a look ahead, especially so like we'll start with Nebraska. Obviously tomorrow night's a big game, but as far as Matt Rhule's first season goes, I was just kind of looking at the schedule because I'm always curious to see what that looks like for a team heading into the season. And the schedule is really not that terrible. First off, they're in the Big Ten West, so that's not awful. There's no unbeatable teams there. They're out of conference. They only have one noteworthy game that's at Colorado. I don't know. Some people are really buying into the Deion Sanders hype. I'm going to have to see it to believe it. Not saying it's not legit. I just feel like Colorado's freaking terrible last year. Like they just suck.
Yeah.
And I know he brought in new guys and stuff like that, but I guess I'm just not convinced that's going to be such a quick turnaround. I do think Nebraska, Colorado, I think there's some history there. I think that's a little bit of a rivalry, but
it is.
Yeah. So but it's a winnable game. I like going to Colorado. They can definitely win that. And then their crossover to the East in the Big Ten is Michigan at Michigan State and Maryland. So Michigan and Maryland are at home. They're not going to beat Michigan, but they could theoretically go on the road and win at Sparty, and Maryland's kind of a toss-up game. So anyways, I don't think that's that bad of a schedule for Rhule. Like 4-8 last year, a lot of those games were close. I don't think it's unrealistic to think they could get to 6-6, get to a bowl game. I think that's in play.
Now,
no, I just want.
Or go ahead.
No, the only thing I was just going to mention really quick is, were you going to say something on Nebraska, or were you going to say something separate?
No, I was going to say something about the game, but you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say on Minnesota side after tomorrow night, they actually have a pretty brutal schedule.
Break that down.
They're at UNC, which is pretty tough out of conference. I mean, I don't think North Carolina is supposed to be as good, but still, you have to
I mean,
go to North Carolina.
with Drake May too.
Right. That's kind of a scary game.
Yeah.
Their crossover, they play Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State. Michigan and Michigan State are at home. They are at Ohio State. And then in the West, again, they play all the same teams Nebraska does. But the one noteworthy thing is Iowa and Wisconsin, probably two of their tougher opponents in the West, are both away games. So kind of a brutal schedule, in my opinion, for Minnesota. Maybe not brutal, but tough. Certainly tougher in Nebraska.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. But no, so I was gonna ask, do you think people love to be dramatic? I think it's kind of people get so dramatic because it's week one, hasn't even started. There's not a lot to work with. I've seen some dramatic headlines about how like this game is pivotal for Matt Rhule to win and get started on the right track. Do you buy into any of that at all?
No, not really. I mean, I just don't think expectations are that crazy high for him this year.
Right.
I don't think it's a must-win game. I mean, you go through their schedule, and again, they could win week 2 at Colorado. They get Northern Illinois, Louisiana Tech, Northwestern's on the schedule. Purdue's not going to be very good this year. I mean, there's lots of winnable games in there. So, no, I don't really buy into that. It'd be a great win. There's no doubt. Like, I think it'd be a big win for the program, but I wouldn't look at it as a must win.
Yeah, I think if Nebraska wins tomorrow, I think Husker Nation is going to be going crazy with
be a great win
for this season. They're going to be very excited, which you can't blame them too much, but it is. I mean, I know they get a lot of flack. There's pretty controversial fan base, but they are a very loyal fan base. But yeah, so I mean, kind of in conclusion in that game, I think I would take Nebraska with the spread, and then also I would take the under. I don't see a lot of points being put up in that game, and that's part of the reason too why I don't see Minnesota winning by a touchdown, because I just don't see them scoring that much. Could be a lot of field goals, maybe one touchdown, but
yeah, it'll just depend. That quarterback being a new quarterback, anytime you have a brand new quarterback, which I know Nebraska technically has a new quarterback too. With Minnesota running a new system, it's just really hard to say. The system could look terrible, or they could come out and look like world beaters. It's kind of a tough one. But yeah, given how bad the offense was last year, I would probably lean towards it'll be a little sloppy.
Mm-hmm. A lot of flags, and even I've heard. I was listening to a press conference yesterday from Matt Rhule, and he really harped on how impressed he is with the special teams. So special teams is that little unit kind of nobody really, or not. I mean, the general viewer is not going to really pay too much attention to, but I'm kind of curious to see how special teams is, because I mean, it does play a pretty big part in the game.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on from Nebraska, Minnesota, the second big game of the night, Florida at number 11, Utah. Utah is currently favored by a touchdown.
I think that line's dropped a little bit. I was thinking I was seeing like 4.5.
Okay, with more news coming up. Yeah. Do you want to maybe check that?
Sure? No, I'm looking at it right now. I'm seeing like 4.5 on some of the lines, but I'm guessing that's because Cam Rising just got listed like today, maybe even this afternoon, is doubtful for tomorrow night.
Yeah.
So I haven't been following the line that closely, admittedly, but if you saw 7 recently, my hunch would be that line is probably just a reaction to that.
Yeah. That makes sense. But no, so you got Billy Napier and Kyle Whittingham going at it. Kyle Whittingham, I did not know this, but he is the second longest tenure coach in NCAA FBS. He's been with Utah for 17 seasons. Do you know who number 1 is, Michael?
Longest tenured coach in the FBS?
Yeah.
Kirk Ferentz at Iowa.
Yep. And do you know number 3 actually tied with? Actually, it's a 2-way tie at 17 years. This one kind of surprised me, made me feel kind of old.
Who is it?
Mike Gundy with Oklahoma State.
Oh yeah, I think I actually might have, if I would have really thought about that. I knew he's been there for a really long time.
Isn't that anytime I think of Mike Gundy, just that press conference just seared in my mind. I remember watching Sports Center one day and just seeing that.
Yeah, that was a long time ago too.
I'm a man. I'm 40. Yeah, I
Yeah, that
know.
was
It
like
seems like
2008-ish. I think when he originally did that, which I mean, that was only 15 years ago. So yeah, he's been there forever.
But no, yeah. So Utah ranked number 11. At the time of when I was doing my research, pretty much no one had any idea what's going on with Cam Rising. People are saying he's playing. People are saying no, he's out. But now more news has developed that more than likely he's not going to be playing. I think that this changes all the dynamics in the game. There's actually the QB situation. I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's actually kind of a mess at Utah right now. Are you familiar with this?
Mm-mm.
So Brandon Rose was the backup quarterback. He was taking majority of the snaps for like the preseason and for camp and stuff like that. And he actually, the unthinkable happened. He actually went down in a scrimmage. One of his players hit him, and now they're thinking he might be out for the season. And that's their second string. I just had, what is that guy? Oh, I believe Bryson Barnes is the third string. So he's more than likely going to be stepping up. He's a walk-on. He's a no-star from, I think he like, I was listening. He was a pig farmer, and then he ended up walking on the football team. So that's some pretty big shoes to fill. I know Florida's not exactly like a veteran team, but you know Florida's just swimming athletes over there. I don't know. I think that Florida, this is a huge win for Florida with Barnes picking up the QB role, because I think they're going to be very limited passing. They're already pretty limited in passing. They don't have a lot of receivers. That's a huge weak point for Utah. They lost Dalton Kincaid to the draft last year, and also one of their best tight end, Brent, I want to say Kuithe. He is not playing also tomorrow night. So kind of to add insult to injury, which he is a huge he's a huge target at wideout for them. But Utah, offensive line, they're known for a great offensive line. They're going to be Barnes is going to have that going for him. He shouldn't have to worry about too much. I know Florida, Billy Armstrong, I talked about in the last video about the hire of Billy Armstrong. Doing a little more research into him, it kind of made a little more sense. If you didn't see the last, he is Florida's newest defense coordinator at 29 years old. From the sounds of it, it sounds like he likes to bring the hammer. I did not know this last time, but so his defense ranked third nationally in tackles for loss. They ranked fourth in sacks per game at Southern Miss, and they were seventh in interceptions. So again, not great news for Utah there, bringing pressure to a essentially novice QB. Doesn't sound like a great recipe. I don't know with Utah tomorrow night.
Yeah, one thing I'd throw in is I do know, so they have like a true freshman quarterback, Nate Johnson.
For Utah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think they plan to use, like, I don't think he's going to start tomorrow, but supposedly he's like lightning in a bottle fast, ran like a 10-4 100-meter dash or something like that last year in high school.
Yeah, Jesus.
Even coming into the year before all the issues, I think they thought he might be like a wildcat package guy because he's just such an explosive athlete.
Yeah.
So that might be something to keep an eye on. Again, he's a true freshman, so I think ideally they were hoping they probably wouldn't have to turn him loose
Right.
game one, but he might be someone to keep an eye on tomorrow night if the quarterback situation really does get that bad.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because I think Barnes played a little bit in the Rose Bowl, but that was pretty much it for him.
Yeah.
Looking at Florida, offensively, they bring in Graham Mertz from Wisconsin. It seems like there is a little bit of a buzz about him. There's people buying into the transfer portal. It kind of like has a sense of, I feel like, renewing people's reputation, kind of giving them a second shot at things. People a little more hopeful that they're going to turn around at this new destination. But I mean, Mertz, when you look at his time in the Big Ten, he failed to make the top 6 in QB ratings in Big Ten play. He has the exact opposite play style as Richardson. So Florida fans, if you watch Florida football, you know the deal with Anthony Richardson, just crazy playmaker, out of the pocket, doesn't sit in there for long, but I mean, he can make something out of nothing. Mertz is going to be, your typical pocket passer. They don't really have like elite receivers. Like I said with Florida, they're going to be athletic, but nobody that really stands out. So I'm curious to see, they had a great recruiting class, Florida, this year. So I'm curious to see if maybe they have some freshmen that step up and have a huge games. I mean, this can be a bigger platform. First game of the season, there's going to be tons of people watching. So I think it'd be a great platform for Florida to step up, or for some receivers to step up. But I know also, though, Utah, I mean, that's kind of Utah. They're known as the tough team in the Pac-12. So they're definitely very physical. I know they usually have pretty good secondary too. So should be a pretty good matchup out there as well.
Yeah. I like the contrast between the two teams. Utah is like that stereotypical, we're fundamentally sound. We don't necessarily have the best athletes, but we get the most out of them.
Yeah.
Like that's the MO at Utah. And then like Florida's like the opposite, where it's like we couldn't have more crazy, freakish athletes, but like we're not the disciplined, I'm not saying that's like the accurate stereotype, but
yeah,
kind of to an extent it is. Like, Utah, just like they have their system, they're going to line up. This is what they're going to do. They're going to play clean football. They're not going to beat themselves. And like Florida is just like the opposite. Florida historically is like too many athletes, not enough balls to go around, beat themselves, all that type of stuff. So I'm pretty curious. Last year's week 1 game I remember watching that. It was a fantastic game.
Yeah, that was really good.
Honestly, it was kind of a damning loss for Utah. Cause if you remember, Utah coming into last season they were like the dark horse. I don't even know if you would go as far as saying dark horse. I mean, they were like into conversations to make the playoff. And then that loss to Florida just kind of killed them. Even though they went on to win, they finished the regular season I think they finished 9-3 technically. Then they won the Pac-12 to get to 10 wins, but still they had 10 wins last year, so they still had a great season. But it's just a big revenge spot, I feel like, for Utah. They went out to Florida last week 1. Probably felt like they got punked a little bit because Richardson really wasn't that good the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So I 100. I think they want this game for sure. They want some payback on Florida after Florida kind of ruined their start to last year. The only other thing I'd add in that I think is kind of interesting to watch is it feels like these days. I mean, now starting next season, the conferences are practically dissolving at this point, but You only get so many conference v conference matchups in the preseason. And so, like, for instance, this SEC versus Pac-12 game is going to be held up for the rest of the season to be like the measuring stick, right? If, well, how good is the Pac-12? Well, this is what Utah did against Florida. Like last year, I thought it was kind of damning because, again, Utah was one of the best Pac-12 teams. I mean, they won the Pac-12 championship in the end. And Florida was like a middle-of-the-road SEC team. So everyone kind of used that against the Pac-12 to be like, well, one of your best teams couldn't actually beat our middle-of-the-road team. So I think, like, again, I'm not saying it's like the best, most fair way to do it, but I think from a conference to conference standpoint, I think a lot of people look at these games and they go, you know, Utah's supposed to be one of the best Pac-12 teams. No one really expects much out of Florida. So if Utah loses at home, regardless of the quarterback situation, most people don't go back and look for that much, you know, substance when they're going back and look, you know, mid-season to see where the teams are all stacking up. So, I mean, there's a lot of significance from that standpoint too. Again, I think way more for Utah than Florida. Expectations just like aren't that crazy high for Florida. Middle of the road team. SEC is a better conference. So, yeah, it'll be a fun one to watch just because of all that.
Yeah, I think, anytime you have these two teams, it's always a compelling matchup. But kind of getting into what you were just saying, I just had what I wanted to say. I forgot. What were you just talking about?
Well, one thing I was going to add really quick. I was just saying like the conference v conference dynamics.
Oh,
I had been talking about with in the weight of a game like this. But the only other thing I was going to throw in there is that Mertz, the Florida quarterback, he he was a 5-star quarterback coming out of high school.
Oh, yeah.
Like very highly touted recruit.
Yeah. So I guess there is potential there.
Yeah, but he really did not play well at Wisconsin. I remember watching some of those games and like I think it became a mental thing after a while. You know what I mean? Like mentally it wasn't the right system. I mean, I just remember watching some of those games with Wisconsin though, and like he would come off the sidelines and it felt like people would always like high five him and he just felt like in his own world. And he just could not get it going at Wisconsin. So we'll see. I mean, it's a fresh start down at Florida. He's gonna have way more athletes to toss the ball to, but I'm kind of curious. I'm really curious actually to see how he looks just because 5-star guy really did not work at Wisconsin. Here's your fresh start at Florida. Again, if he looks like what he looked like at Wisconsin, I don't know how dynamic that Florida offense is going to be. But if he looks like a true 5-star quarterback, then, you know, it could be a big change. And like you said, very different look from Richardson, polar opposite quarterback, pocket passer. Not say he's not an athletic guy, but he's not looking to use his legs.
Yeah. And
not on a regular basis.
No. And well, that you brought up Richardson again. I wanted to talk about something with him. I was watching the highlights from that game a day ago or so. I saw this highlight where Richardson, he threw a pick and he was chasing down like I think the guy was a linebacker who picked him off, and Richardson just going screaming across the field. The linebacker was fairly slow, and Richardson, it doesn't even look like he pushes that hard. Richardson just literally gives him a push. The guy flies into the opposite, or I think it was Florida's bench, and he literally just like gets just absolutely demolished by Anthony Richardson. So that just goes to show his like athleticism and his strength there. But no, touching back with Mertz, I'm kind of torn a little bit because I don't want to get too hyped up with him because of his production at Wisconsin. I know, but you do have to kind of look a little bit. Wisconsin ran. I know they're switching up now with Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell's trying to change up the status quo, but it was a predominantly run system over there. And I hate to make too many excuses, but possibly it works better for him here with Billy Napier. I know I kind of I did put him on the hot seat, Billy Napier, but I do think I believe in him as a coach. I kind of just looking at his records in the past. He took Louisiana to I think it was 2 10-1 seasons, including a big it was COVID year, but still you can't really count against him. He upset Iowa State, and then the year after that, I think it was Michigan, or it was some Power 5 school, and they only lost. I mean, it was like a 10-point game. So not too bad. I don't know. I think Bill, he's pretty. If you look at the history, he's kind of lethal in these first week games, as you can see from last year too. So I guess kind of coming to a conclusion on this game. I just quarterback play is just that's too big of an issue for me. For Utah, I just no Cam Rising. I think that's just such a huge piece for Utah. They lose Cam Rising. I know they're solid pretty much everywhere else, but still, that quarterback's just such a huge position. Barnes, I'm sure he's a great kid. I'm sure he works super hard, but Armstrong and his defense are going to be licking their chops seeing a walk-on quarterback like that. And it's going to help that they're at Utah, but I don't know. I'm going to have to take Florida in this one.
Yeah. I'm going to stick with Utah. Even though I know there's a lot of question marks with the quarterback, I'm just going to count on them I'm going to count on that quarterback to be able to do enough to get him over the hump. The Utah system will be in place. I think we'll see with Florida. I think they have a tendency to kind of beat themselves. And like I said, it's such a big revenge spot. Utah just had this game freaking circled. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? The players want this. The fans are going to be rowdy as hell tomorrow night inside that stadium. Like they're going to want this so bad. Not to say Florida doesn't want it, but I don't know if it'll have the same pull there. So I'm going to say Utah, but I think it'll be a fun game and it should be competitive. And honestly, it's really just disappointing that Rising's not playing because he is a stud and hopefully he's back soon. But I'm going to take the Utah system tomorrow night. Like I said, I think it'll be close. I think it'll be competitive, but I'm gonna take the Utah system to get it done.
And would you take them with the spread, Utah?
4.5?
Yeah. Would you like them to cover or just money line?
I would just go money line because I could see it being a field goal game easy. Like I could see Florida potentially covering that, being right there at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So I'd probably just go money line. I don't know if I would feel confident because I mean I could 100% see a world in which Mertz comes out and looks really good. You know.
Yeah.
It's not like he's getting his first start. He's played big college football before, so depending on how he looks and how the system connects around him. But like I said, I'm just kind of counting on Utah to be able to get it done at home.
I think though, looking at the line, I think that is 45 points. I think that's pretty high for one offense that is going to be handicapped. I think if I know we contrast in our views with this game, but to me, I think if Utah wants to have a chance to win this game, I think their defense is going to have to step up in a huge way. And 45 points seems pretty high to me. I mean, unless Utah can just establish a dominant running game, then who knows? But what do you think about that 45-point line or over under?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably lean under too, just because of all those reasons. Skill players being out, new skill players coming in. So yeah, I'd go under. I'll be curious to see if that line moves at all. Maybe that is the new line with the official word that Rising's likely not playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably lean under.
Okay. I was just trying to pull up the rest of the games on Thursday. I felt like there was one more, just like it was a bigger school, but they were kind of playing a cream puff. I don't know. It's not popping up for me, but anyway, undoubtedly those two games should be great games. I don't foresee any blowouts tomorrow. I think they're going to be pretty close. Who knows? College football is crazy sometimes. But we do appreciate you stick around if you're still watching here. Hooked on Football Podcast. We're trying to do one stream every week and maybe more. We'll see. We're looking at possibly come back on Friday or Monday we will keep you updated. But we appreciate you guys, and thank you for watching.